She never got to have a father. Death took him before she even learned what the word was. Her mother tried to rebuild with someone else, but when that mother passed away, the stepfather revealed his true character. He drank, he raged, and eventually, he sold her like she was nothing but an animal. By the summer of 1887, Eliza was a mere 23 years old but already bore the marks of a lifetime. She'd been passed from one hard hand to another until she didn't think she belonged anywhere anymore. And here she was, lying half dead in a forgotten cemetery, crying out to the vacant sky that she was no longer clean. But what is the question? If you came riding across that barren place and discovered her lying there amongst the dead, would you ride away, or drop to your knees beside her? The Llano Estacado gave no quarter to men, let alone women. It was so big and empty it made even the most experienced horseman feel small. Out there, the sun burned the very life out of the grass, the wind pushed dust deep into your lungs, and even the dead seemed abandoned. That was where Jacob Miller was one sweltering day. Jacob was 47, striding toward the shallow grave where his wife had been interred during the days of the epidemic. He comforted himself it would be just a visit, a silent moment with the past. But the prairie doesn't care about oaths. He swung down from his horse, hat clutched in his hand, and the stillness pressed down. Graves lay stretched out on the earth like wounds, each one testifying to the fact that death always wins. Jacob did not ask questions, only a little bit of peace where his wife rested. But the land had different plans. He had believed it was merely a heap of rags thrown away by some stranger. Folks did that out here, letting the wind disperse the trash. But then it moved. A faint sound escaped, sharp enough to freeze him in place. His hands automatically rose to his rifle, instincts acutely on the lookout. But what he saw next drew the His hands automatically rose to his rifle, instincts acutely on the lookout. But what he saw next drew the air directly from his chest. It was a young woman, her face pale against the dust, her body battered and broken. She clutched a strip of cloth like it was her last piece of the world. Her lips moved, and the words came soft, just enough for Jacob to hear. "I'm not clean anymore." Those were not dirt words. They were not blood words. They were words about something else, something shattered in her heart. Jacob felt it cut right through him, for he too had been emptied of fullness, the kind that leaves a man with nothing. Losing his wife had done just that to him. And now, here this girl was, lying to die among the cast-off dead, already believing she was worthless. He could have walked away. No one would ever know. No one would blame him. But in the silent graveyard, with the quiet hefting down, Jacob knew the choice he was making that moment would change everything. He knelt beside her. She trembled like a calf in the cold, but there was a fierce spark in her eyes. Jacob drew water from his canteen, and she drank slow, each gulp paining her. And then, in heaving breaths, she told her story. Her real father had died when she was a child. Her mother had remarried in hope of security, but the man she married was poison. When her stepfather's wife died, her stepfather grew cruel, beating her, cursing her, and eventually selling her like a sack of beans at the trading post. She escaped when she could. Liberty on the frontier was a myth. 2 men caught her. They beat her. They used her. And when they'd done, they left her here, wrapped in cloth among the dead, to let death finish the work. Jacob overheard. Every word hung heavy upon him. He knew men's cruelty. He had seen greed make them beasts less than human. But to hear it flow from her lips here, of all the places in the world, lit a fire burning in his veins. And then it happened. The sound of boots on dry ground. Jacob turned around, and there he was, a man walking into the graveyard, a crooked grin plastered across his face. His eyes zeroed in on Eliza as if she belonged to him already. "Well now," the man drawled, "look what we got here. Thought I left you for the coyotes." Jacob rose, stiff and unhurried. muscle tensed, his hand easing toward his rifle. Tension hung heavy in the air. The man growled, his own hand reaching for his gun. Too late. The Winchester's report ripped the silence wide open. The bullet ripped into the man's shoulder, whirling him around. He cursed, spat, and staggered back into the brush, savage eyes blazing with rage. "This ain't over, old man," he snarled. "You hear me? This ain't over." And then he vanished into the dust, leaving a blood trail behind him. Jacob dropped his rifle, his chest rising and falling, his world altered forever. Eliza stared at Jacob, not with gratitude, but amazement. No one had ever stood up for her before. And yet here he was, a stranger who had risked his life in a graveyard overrun with ghosts. Jacob did know one thing for certain. The bullet he had fired wasn't going to be the last. Wounded predators always come back worse. That outlaw would be back. The only question was when. And this is the question that you need to ask yourself. Standing in Jacob's boots, what would you do? Would you return Eliza to your ranch, knowing it could bring strife right to your doorstep? Or would you ride off, letting her fate to the dust? Jacob made a choice. The cemetery was not the kind of place to linger around. He scooped up Eliza and held her in his arms, surprised at how light she was, and led her to his horse. She did not struggle. She clung tighter onto that piece of cloth, the final scraps of her broken world. Jacob ripped off his own coat and put it around her shoulders. Too big, but warm. The ride back was strained and long. Jacob never took his eyes from the horizon, anticipating the outlaw's shadow to reappear. But the plains were quiet. By the time they reached his ranch, sunset colored the sky red. Jacob swung down out of the saddle and led Eliza in. The ranch house was plain, made of rough wood, but it was strong and safe. He put her down in the bed that his wife had occupied. Rememberings pulled at him like barbed wire, but he pushed them off. The girl had no place else to go. He heated water, washed her wounds with work-stained hands but as unyielding as a surgeon's. She winced but did not cry, and Jacob had a grudging respect for that sort of strength. He gave her broth, urged her to drink, and let her rest. With every wake-up, she tightened his coat over her shoulders as if it could shield her from the world. For Jacob, those quiet hours stirred something he thought he'd left at home with his wife. Not love, not yet, but purpose. A reason to keep someone alive aside from himself. For the first time in years, the ranch sprang to life. But here's the thing, folks. Peace on the frontier never lasts. Out here, quiet hours are only the calm before the storm. Jacob noticed it in the late afternoon. The chickens flustered. The dog refuses to settle. And the gentle, distant thud of hooves pounding hard. He set the water pail aside, made his way slowly towards the house. His Winchester leaned against the doorframe, always within reach. Eliza sat by the window, eyes open wide, clutching his coat as a shield. She felt it too. Danger came. Two men rode out of the dust cloud. One was the outlaw Jacob had winged, his arm still wrapped in a grimy sling. The other was bigger, nastier, and his eyes indicated that he intended to spill blood. Both wore rifles across their saddles. Jacob's jaws clenched. He stepped inside and whispered to Eliza, "Keep back, whatever comes." She nodded, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the coat more tightly. Slowly, Jacob chambered his rifle. Panic had never killed a man, and he had fought enough battles to know steady hands were more valuable than speed. The horseman reined up beside the corral, shouting across the yard, "Miller, you've got something that belongs to us. Send her on out, and maybe we'll let you live to see another dawn." Jacob stepped out onto the porch, rifle ready, hat low. His voice was steel. "Take nothing from this place but lead." The universe waited half a breath. Then the night erupted. Gunfire ripped through the silence. Bullets cut through wooden pillars, shattered glass behind him. Jacob went down on one knee and blazed back. His first round cut into the smaller outlaw's horse, toppling the creature in a screaming vortex of dust. The rider fell, cursing, firing wildly. Jacob moved, steady, unwavering. He shot again. Jacob's second bullet was a hit, skimming the outlaw's thigh and spinning him violently into the dust. The large man roared, dismounted, and fired. One of the bullets tore through Jacob's shoulder, slamming him back against the porch. He gritted his teeth, blood soaking through his shirt, but he forced himself to stand. Inside, Eliza heard every shot. Her heart pounded like a drum in her breast. On the table lay Jacob's revolver. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She had never killed a man, but fear was smothered by anger. Anger more burning than her fear. She opened the door just wide enough to see the bigger outlaw coming on, eyes blazing. She raised the pistol in trembling hands. She squeezed the trigger, and the man fell into the dust, dead as he struck the earth. The silence that ensued was heavier, more suffocating than the fight itself. Smoke drifted through the yard, wisps curling low in the summer air. The wounded outlaw, the same, he struggled to his feet and hobbled away, disappearing into the horizon. Jacob leaned against the porch railing, pain burning through his shoulder, but his eyes never left Eliza. She stood in the doorway, Jacob's coat billowing around her in the wind, revolver still held in her hand. In that moment, she didn't look like a broken girl left to die. She looked like someone who'd just reclaimed her life. Jacob's voice was low, through blood and dust. It's over, for now. But out west, nothing stays quiet for long. And here's the question I'll put to you. If you were Eliza, there with that revolver smoking in your hand, would you feel relief? Or would you know deep down that trouble was only waiting till tomorrow? The yard was still again, except for Jacob's jagged breathing and Eliza's pounding heart. One outlaw lay dead in the dirt. The other had vanished into the prairies. But Eliza, the girl who whispered one night she was not clean anymore, was changed. Jacob collapsed onto the steps, clutching. She braced herself for rejection, for the same look of revulsion she'd seen all too often already. But Jacob just stretched out his hand, placed his calloused palm over hers, and whispered, "Then it'll be ours now." Those words weighed more than any bullet, and still dropped gentler than a prayer. At that moment, he wasn't merely offering her a roof. He was offering her dignity, belonging, family, and Eliza, who had once believed she was ruined beyond redemption, finally began to think she could be whole again. Frontier living was never easy. There would always be peril, dirt, and men who thought they could possess other human beings. Yet within it there was also choice, survival, and the strength of two souls who would not let the world shatter them. So I have to ask you this. If you were Jacob, would you have opened your home to a stranger, knowing the danger she carried with her? And if you were Eliza, would you have found the courage to trust again after everything had been torn from you? Because stories like this remind us, the hardest battles aren't fought with rifles or revolvers. They're fought in the heart, in the decision to keep going, to keep caring, even when the past screams at you to quit. If this story moved you, if you believe the Old West has more to teach us, share this video with others so they can find it too. And if you're hungry for more frontier tales, stories of love, loss, justice, and redemption, subscribe and join us. Because out here on the prairie, there are always more stories to be told.